What if Jon Snow married Daenerys Targaryen before the Battle of Winterfell? What if the war for the living had begun not with division, but with a single calculated act of union? Consider the arithmetic of it. A queen with 2 dragons and an army born of foreign shores. A king who bent the knee and forfeited his crown to secure that army. And behind them, a fractured north that trusts neither the woman nor the sacrifice her presence demands. The dead are marching. The cold comes ahead of them like a held breath. And in the gray hours before that reckoning, 2 people decide that the only way to hold a fracturing coalition together is to become, in the eyes of gods and men, one thing instead of 2. Daenerys stands at the window of her chamber in Winterfell, watching her Dothraki make their fires in the yard below, and she understands the problem with perfect clarity. Her army follows her. It does not follow the north. The northern lords in turn follow Jon, or they follow the memory of a Stark who once ruled these halls, and they look at her horsemen and her freed slaves and her monstrous children in the sky, and they see conquest wearing the mask of alliance. 2 armies sharing walls are not one army. They are a quarrel waiting for a spark, and there is no time for the slow work of trust. There is only the war, and how many days remain before it arrives. Jon comes to her that evening, and the conversation moves like 2 commanders surveying the same battlefield from opposite hills. He does not speak of love, though it is there beneath the words, unspoken and inconvenient. He speaks of the lords. He speaks of how they murmur in the great hall, how they resent the knee he bent at Dragonstone, how they will not spill northern blood for a Targaryen queen, who to them is only the daughter of the Mad King made flesh again. She listens, she calculates, and when he says the word marriage, he says it not as a promise, but as a solution, and she receives it the same way, because they have both learned that sentiment is a luxury the ruling cannot always afford. Yet consider the truth beneath the strategy. They want this, both of them. And the danger is precisely that the wanting makes the calculation suspect, so it must be dressed in the robes of policy before it can be trusted. This is where Tyrion enters, because Tyrion understands better than anyone that a marriage of love is a scandal and a marriage of state is a treaty. He counsels them plainly. The union must be presented as alliance. It must be spoken of as the joining of 2 claims, 2 armies, 2 futures. Let the lords believe it is a bargain struck by cold and clever minds, and they will accept it as men accept the weather. Let them suspect it is only 2 hearts indulging themselves on the eve of extinction, and they will name it foolishness. And foolishness, at the top of a command, is the thing that gets everyone killed. So the ceremony is arranged with the speed of a military maneuver. The godswood is chosen because the godswood belongs to the north, and the heart tree, with its bleeding red face, is the oldest witness these lands possess. Daenerys, who keeps the Lord of Light and the gods of her ancestors, agrees to be wed beneath a tree whose faith is not her own, because she understands the symbol. This is not her marriage bending the north to her. This is her marriage bending to the north. The optics matter. Every gesture is a piece placed upon the board. Davos stands as one witness, the smuggler turned knight turned counselor, a man of the North's cause if not its blood, and his presence anchors the ceremony to the world of the northern lords. Missandei stands as the other, the translator, the freed woman of Noth, and she anchors it to Essos, to the Unsullied and the Dothraki, and everything Daenerys carries at her back. 2 witnesses, 2 worlds. The marriage becomes a bridge built in a single night, and every soul who hears of it will understand, whether they wish to or not, that the 2 halves of this army are now bound at their highest point. The vows are quiet. The heart tree watches with its carved and weeping eyes. Snow drifts down through the branches and settles on dark hair and darker cloaks. And the words are spoken in the old way, and then it is done. Two claims become one. Two armies acquire a single reason to bleed together. And somewhere beyond those walls, the dead do not care, and they come on regardless. But here, for this moment, the living have made themselves a little harder to break. But watch the shadows at the edge of the godswood, because that is where the true tension of this hour lives. Sansa Stark stands apart, half hidden by the trees, and her face holds none of the relief the ceremony is meant to produce. She sees the danger her brother does not. She remembers that Jon rode south a king and returns a subject. She remembers that promises made to foreign queens have a way of costing the North its independence, its grain, its sons, and finally, its name. She looks at Daenerys, and she does not see a savior. She sees ambition wearing a wedding cloak, and she keeps her counsel because she has learned that a woman who shows her doubts too early gives her enemies the map to her defeat. Arya is there too, and then she is not. She slips away before the last words are spoken, quiet as she has trained herself to be, and she carries no illusions about what she has witnessed. Her brother is married. Everything that follows will be shaped by that fact. The girl who counts faces and names understands that a new player has entered the game at the very center of her family, and she resolves, without ceremony, to watch this queen, to learn her, to measure her against the danger she might one day pose. Sansa will fight her war with words in the Great Hall. Arya will fight hers in silence, in observation, in the patience of someone who has learned to wait. And so the union is made, and the coalition holds, for now. But holding is not the same as trusting, and beneath the snow-quiet godswood, the first fault lines have already begun to move. The morning after a wedding is rarely gentle, and the morning after this one arrives gray and cold, with the great hall of Winterfell filling slowly with the men and women who hold the North in their weathered hands. They come wrapped in furs, still damp with snow, and they take their places along the long tables, and there is a stillness among them that is not peace. It is the stillness of a held breath. Consider the arithmetic of the room. Every lord who sits here bent his knee to Jon Snow. Every one of them raised him up, spoke his name as king, laid the weight of the North upon his shoulders. And now they wake to find that the man they crowned has, in a single night, bound himself to a foreign queen who rides dragons and speaks of a throne far to the south. The question hangs before anyone gives it voice, and then it is given voice, and by the smallest person present. If you're enjoying this alternate history of Westeros so far, please consider subscribing. I upload new stories every single day. Now, let's continue with the story. Lyanna Mormont is 10 years old, and she stands when the men twice her age remain seated, and her voice does not tremble. She has never learned to make it tremble. She asks the thing they are all thinking, and she asks it without apology. They named Jon Snow king in the North. They did not name him king so that he might hand the crown to a Targaryen bride. What was the point, she wants to know, of all that blood and all those oaths, if the North is to be given away in a marriage bed? Watch the room shift. Watch the older lords, who would never have dared to speak first, find their courage in the words of a child. A murmur moves along the benches like wind through winter grass. This is the danger Daenerys has walked into with open eyes, and she knows it because she has walked into rooms like this before, in cities far from here, where the people looked at her and saw a conqueror wearing the clothes of a liberator. She has options. She always has options. She could remind them of her dragons, of her armies, of the simple mathematics of who holds power and who does not. She could answer defiance with dominance, as she has done before, as a part of her wants to do now. But Daenerys Targaryen did not survive this long by playing every card in the order it was dealt to her. She measures the room, she sees the fault lines, and she chooses, deliberately, to bend. She rises, and she does not speak of fire, she speaks of respect. She pledges that the North will keep its ancient rights, its old customs, its own governance, that no southern hand will strip away what the North has held since before the Targaryens ever crossed the narrow sea. She offers not conquest but continuity. She offers the one thing these people fear losing above all else, which is themselves. It is a masterful move, and Tyrion sees it for what it is, and Tyrion is troubled. He watches his queen concede independence to the North, in front of witnesses, in front of lords who will carry her words home and repeat them, and he understands the price. What she gives freely here, she cannot easily take back elsewhere. If the North keeps its rights, why not the Iron Islands? Why not Dorne? Why not every kingdom that ever chafed under a single crown? He will tell her this later, quietly, in the way he tells her things she does not wish to hear. A promise made in one hall echoes in every hall. A queen who negotiates her authority once has taught the world that her authority is a thing that can be negotiated. He does not say it now. He waits. He is a man who has learned the value of the well-chosen moment. For the lords, the concession buys silence, if not warmth. They do not cheer, but they do not rise against her. And in a room this cold, an absence of open revolt is nearly a victory. The coalition holds, barely, held together by promises whose weight no one has yet fully counted. Beneath the hall, in the crypts where the stone kings of winter keep their long vigil, another conversation is unfolding, and this one is not for witnesses. Sansa has found her brother among the dead, and she has chosen this place deliberately, because here, surrounded by the bones of their ancestors, she can speak the truth she cannot speak upstairs. She tells him he is blind, not cruelly, but plainly. She tells him that love has clouded his judgment, that he has surrendered the very thing their people died to win, that the crown they placed upon his head was not his to give away. She reminds him of what the North endured, of Ramsay, of Cersei, of every southern power that ever looked north and saw only a resource to be spent. Jon answers with the argument he believes with his whole heart. The dead are coming. The dead do not care who wears which crown or holds which title. Without Daenerys, without her dragons and her armies, there is no North left to be independent, no living soul left to argue about rights and customs. He is looking at the whole board, he insists, while she stares at a single square. But Sansa has learned to look at every square, and she has learned it in a harder school than he has. She tells him that the enemy of today is not the only enemy, that the war against the dead will end, one way or another, and that when it ends, the living will still have to live together, and the North will still have to survive the peace. She does not trust the Dragon Queen. She does not trust anyone who wants a throne badly enough to marry for it. They do not agree. They cannot agree, because they are looking at different dangers, each of them convinced the other is the fool. The conversation ends without resolution, with tension coiled tight between them, unspoken words hanging in the frozen air like their breath. Sansa turns and climbs back toward the light, and Jon remains among the dead, and neither of them yet knows how much this quiet fracture will cost when the true test comes. Above them, the horns are beginning to sound. What if a single letter could unravel a marriage, a war, and a claim to the Iron Throne all at once? What if the man who carried that letter understood its power completely and chose, for a time, to carry it silently? Samwell Tarly arrives at Winterfell in the gray hours, saddle-sore and frightened, his mind already tangled with what he knows. He had learned it in pieces, and the pieces had assembled themselves into a shape he could not unsee. A boy born in a tower in Dorne, a mother who died in a bed of blood, a father who was not the father Jon had always believed him to be. Sam has ridden a long way with this knowledge pressing against the inside of his chest, and now, as the news of the wedding reaches him through 100 whispering mouths in the courtyard, the pressure becomes unbearable. Jon has married Daenerys. Jon has married his aunt, and Jon does not know. Sam does the arithmetic without wanting to. It is the arithmetic of blood and law, and it arrives at a single, terrible answer. If Rhaegar wed Lyanna, if the marriage was true, if the child was born of that union, then Jon Snow is not a bastard at all. He is Aegon Targaryen, sixth of his name, the true-born son of the crown prince, and the claim that everyone has laid at Daenerys' feet belongs, by every rule the realm has ever honored, to the man who now shares her bed. He finds Bran beneath the weirwood. Bran is where Bran always is now, seated in his chair with the red leaves burning above him and the white bark bleeding its slow red tears, his eyes far away even when they are looking directly at you. Sam stumbles through it. The words come out of him in a rush, disordered, half-formed, the truth spilling like water from a cracked jug. Bran listens. Bran already knows. Bran has always already known. And here is the strangeness of it. Sam expects the revelation to shake the world. He expects Bran to rise, to summon the great and the powerful, to declare before all assembled that the man they call the king in the north is in truth the rightful king of the Seven Kingdoms. Instead, Bran only looks at him with that flat, unhurried calm, the calm of someone who has seen the ending of every road and no longer feels the pull of any single one. Some truths must wait, Bran says. Sam does not understand at first. He argues. He believes in the truth the way a drowning man believes in air, the way a maester believes in the words written down in old books. The truth is the truth, he insists. Jon deserves to know who he is. The realm deserves to know who its king should be. To hide it is to lie, and Sam has spent his whole life fleeing from lies, from a father who called him a coward, from a life shaped by the deceptions of stronger men. But Bran is looking at the whole board. Consider the sequence of events that the truth would set in motion. Daenerys Targaryen has crossed the narrow sea with 2 dragons, an army of Unsullied, a horde of Dothraki, and a lifetime's conviction that the throne is hers by right of blood. She has burned men who would not bend the knee. She has staked her entire being on a single certainty, and that certainty is that she is the last Targaryen and the only one who can rule. Tell her, now, on the eve of the long night, that the man she has married is not merely her husband but her rival, a claimant whose right supersedes her own by every law of succession. And what happens to her certainty? What happens to the alliance? What happens to the 2 armies standing shoulder to shoulder against a foe that does not tire and does not die? Bran does not finish the calculation aloud. He does not need to. The dead are coming. That is the only fact that matters in this moment, and every other fact must arrange itself around it or be discarded. A fractured alliance on the eve of annihilation is not a tragedy in waiting. It is a certainty of destruction. If Jon and Daenerys turn upon each other now, if the poison of the claim enters the marriage before the war is won, then there will be no realm left to rule and no living soul left to inherit anything at all. The Night King does not care who sits the Iron Throne. He cares only that all things which live are made to stop. And so Bran offers Sam not an order, but a logic. And logic, in the end, is harder to defy than any command. Reveal it now, and you may lose everything. Wait, and you lose only time. Time can be recovered if there is anyone left to recover it. The dead cannot be unwound. Some truths must wait until the war is won. Sam stands beneath the weirwood for a long moment, and the leaves whisper above him, and the wind moves through the godswood, carrying the distant sound of the horns. He is a man of honor who has just been handed a dishonorable necessity, and he must decide whether he is strong enough to hold a lie for the sake of something larger than his own conscience. He decides. He will keep the secret. He will keep it until the long night ends, until the dead are burned and the dawn breaks. And only then, when there is a world to be governed, will he unlock the truth and let it do its work. It is not a decision he makes gladly. It is a decision he makes the way a general orders a retreat, knowing the ground he yields will have to be retaken later, at a cost he cannot yet count. And in making it, Sam reshapes the entire war to come. For now Jon and Daenerys will face the dead, not as rival claimants circling one another with wary eyes, but as husband and wife, as king and queen united, as two people bound by vows spoken before the old gods. The secret sleeps beneath the weirwood. The horns grow louder, and somewhere beyond the wall, in the dark, something vast and patient begins, at last, to move. What if a war council, so often a theater of competing egos, became instead a single mind with two mouths? That is what the Great Hall of Winterfell becomes in the days before the dead arrive. The long table has been cleared of its feast remnants and covered instead with maps, with carved figures representing the living and the dead, with charcoal lines drawn and redrawn as one plan gives way to another. And at the head of that table stand not one commander, but two, Jon and Daenerys. And for the first time since her banners came south of the wall, there is no daylight between them. The lords of the north watch this and calculate what it means. They had expected the Dragon Queen to command, and the Northern King to follow, or the reverse. What they see instead unsettles their assumptions. They see a partnership. Consider the arithmetic of it. Daenerys brings knowledge no living Northerner possesses, the memory of fire against flesh, the understanding of what dragons can and cannot do, the discipline of Unsullied, who do not break and do not flee. Jon brings the terrible tutelage of the only man in that room who has fought the dead and lived, who knows how they move, how they swarm, how they rise again from the corpses they make of you. Alone, each of them commands half a war. Together, they command a whole one. And so the positioning begins, piece by piece, figure by figure across the painted board of the battlefield. The Dothraki, she argues, must be given room to ride, for a horse lord penned behind a wall is a horse lord wasted. Jon agrees, but qualifies. The Dothraki charge will be the opening move, a hammer swung once into the dark, and if it fails, they must fall back to the walls or be lost entirely. The Unsullied form the line before the trench, shields locked, spears set, the anvil against which the tide of the dead will break. Behind them, the northern infantry, the men of the mountain clans, and the survivors of the houses, holding the ground between the outer defenses and the castle itself. Every figure placed is a life weighed. Every line drawn is a calculation of how many must die slowly so that others might die not at all. And then there is the matter of the dragons, which is where the council holds its breath. Daenerys will not hold them back. She says this plainly, and there is steel beneath the softness of it. She has spent too long being told to be patient, to wait, to hoard her strength for a throne that means nothing if the world beneath it is a graveyard. Both dragons fly, she declares. Drogon and Rhaegal, from the very first, wings spread against the frozen sky, fire poured down upon the massed dead. Jon does not argue the principle, he argues the method. To fly low is to be seen, and to be seen is to draw the attention of the one thing that can hurt them. He has looked upon the Night King. He has watched that pale figure raise the dead with the lift of an arm. And what he proposes now is not caution, but ambush. Hide them, he says. Hide the dragons in the cloud cover, high and unseen, and let the battle rage below without them until the moment the Night King himself appears. Because he will appear, he always comes to see his work completed, to walk among the fallen and raise them. And when he does, when that pale rider steps onto the field, the dragons descend from the clouds like judgment and burn him from the world before he can lift a hand. It is a gamble that stakes everything on a single strike. Daenerys turns it over in her mind, examining it as one examines a blade for flaws, and finds it good. The dragons will wait above the storm. The trap will be laid in the sky. But a trap requires bait, and the bait, it emerges, is Bran. The boy who is no longer entirely a boy sits in his chair and speaks of it without fear, which is its own kind of horror. The Night King wants him, wants what he holds, the memory of the world, the record of all that was. For to kill the keeper of memory is to erase the past and make the endless night complete. And so, Bran will go to the godswood beneath the weirwood, exposed, waiting, a lure cast into dark water to draw the great fish to the surface. The Night King will come for him, and when he does, the dragons will fall. It is a plan built on the willingness to place the most precious thing they possess directly in the path of the enemy, and it is precisely because it is so terrible that it might work. Into this moment walks a ghost, Theon Greyjoy, who betrayed this house and burned for it, who was broken and remade into something less than a man, and then, slowly, into something more, returns to Winterfell and kneels. He asks for nothing but the right to give. He will stand in the godswood. He will hold the line before Bran with what remains of the Ironborn who followed him, and he will die there if dying there is what the boy requires. Jon looks at him for a long moment, and in that look there is a lifetime of grievance set aside, because the dead do not care who wronged whom in the world of the living. Bran speaks then, quietly, and grants him the thing he has crossed the world to earn. You can come home now, he tells Theon. The words land like absolution. The plan holds. And when the council empties at last, when the maps lie finished, and the figures are placed, and the terrible arithmetic is done, Jon and Daenerys remain, alone, with the guttering candles and the weight of what they have arranged. He speaks of after, not from certainty, but from need, the need of two people standing at the edge of an abyss to imagine there is ground on the other side, a world without a wheel to break upon it, a world they might build together if the dawn comes. She listens, and for a moment the queen is set aside and only the woman remains, and she lets herself believe it. Outside the wind shifts. It carries a cold that is not the ordinary cold of winter, and on the walls, the men who keep the watch fall suddenly silent, because in the far distance, along the northern horizon, the first faint blue light has begun to gleam. What if the whole of the living world could be measured in the seconds between one heartbeat and the next, and in those seconds, everything a man loved could be taken from him? The blue light on the horizon does not stay distant for long. It grows. It multiplies. It spreads across the northern edge of the world like frost creeping across glass. And the men on the walls understand, in the marrow of their bones, that the arithmetic done in the war room by candlelight is about to be tested against a foe that does not calculate at all. The dead do not scheme. They do not weigh their losses. They simply come, and their coming is the coming of a tide that has no shore to break upon. Consider the Dothraki, drawn up in the vanguard, 40,000 riders who have never lost a battle they chose to fight. They are the sharpest blade in the Alliance's hand, and Jon and Daenerys have positioned them where a blade should go, at the front, to blunt the first assault. From the backs of their dragons, husband and wife watch them wait in the dark, torches guttering in the wind. Melisandre walks the line then, a figure in red against the black, and she speaks words no one below understands. And the Dothraki blades kindle into flame. Fire runs down the ranks like a river reversing its course. It is beautiful. It is the last beautiful thing many of them will ever see. The charge begins. The riders surge forward into the darkness, their flaming swords a comet's tail streaming toward the enemy, and for a moment, it seems the fire alone might be enough. Then the lights begin to go out. Not slowly, all at once. Across a front a mile wide, the flames wink into nothing. Dozens, then hundreds, then thousands, snuffed as though a great hand has closed over each one, and no riders come back. The silence that follows is worse than any scream, because it tells the living exactly what they are facing, and it tells them they cannot win by counting. Daenerys does not wait for orders because there are no orders left to give. She turns Drogon toward the field, and Jon turns Rhaegal beside her, and together they descend into the killing dark. Dragonfire opens across the frozen ground in long ribbons of white and gold, and where it touches, the dead burn, hundreds falling in a single pass, a swath of destruction so vast it should decide any battle ever fought by mortal men. But the dead are not mortal men. Behind the burning ranks come more ranks, and behind those, more still, an endless procession pouring out of the northern night, without limit and without fear. The dragons scour the field again and again, and each time the tide closes over the scorched earth as water closes over a stone. What if fire, the one weapon the living possess in true abundance, proves not a solution, but a delay? Melisandre understands this. When the survivors of the vanguard fall back toward Winterfell, when the whites press so close to the walls that the archers cannot loose fast enough, she descends from her horse and lays her hands upon the trench that circles the castle, the great ditch packed with oil and pitch, and everything that will burn. She speaks again. The trench ignites in a wall of flame that leaps to the height of the battlements, and for a moment the dead cannot cross, and the living have their breath back, and Jon and Daenerys can run their dragons over the packed masses without fear of striking their own. The plan holds. The plan is holding, barely. But the enemy who commands this host has watched the fire. He has seen the dragons work, and he does what any commander who understands his opponent's strength must do. He takes it away. The wind shifts a second time, and now it carries snow, not the gentle snow of the north, but a wall of white driven, horizontal by a wind that seems to hate. The blizzard descends in an instant, a deliberate thing, a summoned thing, and visibility collapses to nothing. On the ground, the men in the courtyard cannot see the enemy until it is upon them. In the sky, the two dragons vanish from one another's sight, swallowed by the storm, and with them vanishes every thread of coordination that the war room had so carefully spun. Jon shouts her name into the wind, and the wind takes it. Rhaegal wheels through blinding white, and Jon cannot tell if the shapes below are living or dead, cannot tell if his fire falls on the enemy or on his own retreating men, and so he cannot loose it, and so his greatest weapon falls silent when it is needed most. Somewhere in the same storm, Daenerys faces the same paralysis. Drogon straining beneath her, both of them blind. The unity they forged in vows before a heart tree, the trust they placed in one another as they arranged the pieces upon the map. All of it now depends on two people finding each other in a blizzard, summoned specifically to keep them apart. The Night King has studied the shape of their strength, and he has answered it not with strength of his own, but with the removal of theirs. It is, in its cold way, a masterstroke. Below, command dissolves into the melee. The trench fire begins to gutter as the storm smothers it. The dead find the gaps. Men who trained together, who held the line together, are separated by the white and the noise and the sheer press of bodies, and the careful formations drawn in the war room become knots of the living fighting back to back, with no sense of where the walls are or where salvation lies. And in the swirling dark above it all, Jon makes a decision that no plan anticipated. So he does the only thing left to a man who has learned that survival sometimes means abandoning the sky, and he brings Rhaegal down toward the ground where his sword can find what his fire cannot, calling out to her one last time before the storm closes over him completely, not knowing whether she hears, not knowing whether she will follow, not knowing whether either of them will see the other again before the night is through. And what if the dead do not need to be summoned in numbers when the numbers already lie waiting in the ground beneath the feet of the defenders? This is the question the Night King answers now, silently, without gesture beyond the lifting of his arms, and the answer ripples outward through the frozen earth of Winterfell like a stone dropped into still water. In the crypts, where the living had sent their women and children and elderly for safekeeping, the Stone Kings of the North open their eyes. The bones of Starks long dead remember how to stand. And in the courtyard, where men have fallen in the first hour of fighting, those same men rise again, and the enemy multiplies not from beyond the walls, but from within them, until the difference between the living and the dead becomes a matter of seconds rather than sides. Daenerys sees it happen. She sees the fallen defenders rise with pale eyes, and she understands. In that instant of understanding that comes too late to matter, that every death tonight is not a subtraction from her enemy, but an addition to it. This is the arithmetic of the war she has entered. Every loss compounds. Every corpse is a soldier waiting to be recruited by the other side. She turns Drogon toward the courtyard to burn them before they can close ranks, and the dragon obeys, and the fire falls, and for a moment the courtyard is a lake of flame that no dead thing can cross. For a moment, then the swarm reaches Drogon's flanks, climbing, clinging, dragging with the patient weight of numbers that feel no fear and know no fatigue, and the great beast bucks and rolls and throws his rider from his back into the churning dark below. She falls, she strikes the ground, and the dead converge on the queen who has crossed a sea and a continent to die in a courtyard she has known for less than a week. What saves her is not a dragon, and not a husband, and not a prophecy. What saves her is an old knight who has loved her from the first day and asked for nothing in return, who cuts his way to her side, with wounds already blooming across his armor, who plants himself between his queen and the tide, and holds. Jorah Mormont does not calculate his odds. He does not weigh his survival against hers. He simply stands where he has always stood, between Daenerys Targaryen and the thing that would harm her, and he takes the blows meant for her, one after another, until there are too many to take, and still he stands, and still he strikes, until at last he falls across her like a shield of flesh and steel, spent, and she lives because he chose that she should. Above them, Jon fights his own doomed arithmetic. He has brought Rhaegal low, but low is where the danger climbs to meet him, and he cannot find her in the storm and the smoke and the ceaseless motion of the dying. So he does the reckless thing, the thing born of grief he cannot yet name, and he turns Rhaegal toward the tower where the Night King stands unmoving amid the ruin he has authored. One charge, one dragon against one figure of ice. If the Maker falls, the Maid fall with him, and the whole terrible night collapses in a single stroke. It is the gamble every commander dreams of, and the gamble every commander knows better than to make, and Jon makes it anyway, because he has run out of patience for the slow accounting of loss. He does not reach him. From the storm comes another dragon, and this one Jon knows by the wrongness of it, the pale blue fire that is not fire at all, but its inversion, a cold so total it burns. Viserion, dead and risen, the child of Daenerys turned against the man she married, and the ice flame lances out, and Rhaegal screams and veers, and Jon is thrown against the saddle straps and clings there, while his mount fights for altitude and life. The charge dissolves. The Night King does not move to watch it fail. He has already accounted for it. He has already discounted the possibility that a dragon might reach him, because he has a dragon of his own now, and the sky belongs to whoever holds the most of it, and tonight, that is not the living. So Jon abandons the sky. Twice now the plan has bent him back toward the ground, and twice he has learned the same lesson, that the war above cannot be won by the living, that whatever will be decided tonight will be decided by something smaller than a dragon and quieter than a battle. He brings Rhaegal down through the smoke and finds the courtyard, finds the place where his wife lies beneath the body of the man who saved her, and he is off the dragon and running before the beast has fully touched the earth, sword in hand, cutting toward her through the press, with the desperation of a man who has one thing left to protect and will spend everything he has to protect it. And while fire and ice collide above and the courtyard drowns in the risen dead, elsewhere in the castle, the true battle takes its quiet shape. In the Godswood, beneath the red leaves of the heart tree, Bran Stark sits and waits, his eyes rolled white, ranging far from his broken body, drawing the enemy toward him as bait draws the hook. Before him stands Theon Greyjoy, who has betrayed this family and burned for it and come home to die well if he can do nothing else, and he sets his men in a ring around the boy and knocks an arrow and waits for the dead to come, because come they will, because the Night King wants what Bran holds and will spend the whole of his host to take it. And through the corridors, unseen, unheard, a single small figure moves. Arya Stark does not fight the tide. She flows around it. She has trained her whole life without knowing why, and now the why has arrived, and she moves toward the Godswood with a dagger of dragonglass in her hand, and the whole balance of the war resting on whether one girl can cross a courtyard full of the dead without being seen, and reach the tree, and reach the thing beneath it, before the thing beneath it reaches her brother. What if the whole war, all of it, The marches and the sieges and the walls raised across 8,000 years of fearful winters came down at the last to a single blade in a single hand in the space of a single breath. Consider the arithmetic of it. Thousands of the living dying to hold the walls. A dragon queen wheeling in the smoke above. A king with a bastard's name fighting his way through corpses that will not stay dead. And all of it, every calculation, every sacrifice, reducible to one quiet figure moving through the trees while the great slow machinery of the Night King advances toward the boy beneath the heart tree. The dead pour into the godswood now. Theon Greyjoy looses his arrows until his quiver is empty, and then he takes up his spear, and around him his men fall one by one, folded down into the dark, and still the ring holds, thinner and thinner, until the ring is only Theon. He looks at Bran, and Bran opens his white eyes for the briefest moment, and says the only thing that matters, which is a thanks, which is a forgiveness offered without being asked. And Theon lowers his head and levels his spear and charges the Night King himself, because a man who has spent his life running can, at the end, choose to run toward something. It does not last. The Night King takes the spear as one takes a reed and turns it and drives it home, and Theon Greyjoy dies in the snow before the tree that raised him, and there is nothing between the Night King and the boy now, nothing but distance, nothing but the last few steps. He walks them slowly. This is the tell. This is the flaw in the design of a thing that has never once been beaten and has therefore never once needed to hurry. He raises his hand toward Bran, unhurried, certain, a creditor come to collect on a debt 8 millennia in the arrears. And out of the dark she comes. Arya Stark leaps. She has closed the distance no one saw her close, flowed through the gaps no one knew were gaps, and now she springs at the Night King with the dagger raised, and this is the strike she was made for, the culmination of every bruise and every lesson and every night spent no one and everyone at once. But he is not a soldier to be caught unaware. His hand snaps up and closes around her throat and lifts her clean off the ground, and her legs kick at empty air, and the whole war hangs there in his fist. Watch the hands. Everything is in the hands. His right hand throttles her. His left hand is empty, and her right hand, the one holding the dagger, is caught in his other grip. She is held. She is finished. The design has accounted for her leap and closed around it. But the design did not account for the drop. She lets the dagger fall from her caught right hand. It falls, and in the falling, her free left hand comes up beneath it and catches it out of the air, and she drives it up into the Night King's heart in the same motion, before the certainty on his ancient face can even begin to change. Valyrian steel finds the ice at the center of him, and the ice cracks. It spreads outward from the wound, like frost racing across a winter pond. It runs up through his chest, and into his shoulders, and along his outstretched arm, and into the very hand that holds her, and the hand loosens, and she drops to the ground on her feet as he shatters. He does not fall. He breaks. He comes apart into 1,000 shards of black ice that scatter into the snow and are gone. And then, across the whole of the field, the same thing happens everywhere at once. The White Walkers who commanded the dead crack and burst. The Whites mid-stride, mid-strike, mid-lunge, all of them collapse into loose bone and dust, as though the strings that held them upright had been cut in a single instant by a single hand. The tide that had been drowning Winterfell simply stops and falls and is still. The silence that comes after is enormous. It presses down on the survivors like a weight, because they have forgotten what silence sounds like, because for the whole of this long night, the only sound has been the roar of the war for the dawn, and now there is nothing. They stand where they are, the living, in the wreckage of what they defended, blood freezing on their armor, breath steaming in the sudden quiet. None of them speaks, because none of them dares believe it, because to believe it and be wrong would be more than any of them could bear. And in the field beyond the walls, Daenerys Targaryen kneels in the snow beside the body of the old knight who died holding the last ground before her, Jorah Mormont, who loved her past all reason and spent his final breath spending himself between her and the dark. She holds him, and she does not weep loudly. She is a queen, and she has learned to grieve the way queens grieve, which is quietly and completely and forever. Her dragon lowers its great head beside her and mourns in its own tongue. The victory is total, and it has cost her the one man who never once wanted anything from her but her survival. And then she hears her name. Jon comes to her across the ruined field, half dead himself, his sword arm hanging, his face gray with soot and blood, and he calls her name into the terrible new quiet, and she rises. She rises, and she goes to him, and they meet in the middle of everything they have lost, and they hold each other, and around them, the exhausted survivors watch. They watch the king in the north, and the queen, who came south to north, hold each other in the wreckage of the world they saved together. And something is settled in that watching, something that no council could have decreed and no treaty could have written. Neither of them could have won this night alone. Everyone who is left alive to see it knows that now, and what that shared triumph will mean. When the snows melt and the great game turns south again, not one of them has yet begun to reckon. What if the day after a war is more dangerous than the war itself? What if the moment the shared enemy falls is the precise moment the allies remember they were never truly friends? The dead of Winterfell do not care about such questions. They are gathered now in their thousands, laid in long rows across the frozen ground, and the living move among them with torches, doing the grim arithmetic of loss. There are too many to bury in earth that will not yield to the spade, so they build pyres. They build them tall and they build them wide, and the smoke of the burning climbs into a sky that has finally, mercifully, cleared of that unnatural cold. Daenerys walks among the fallen with a single torch in her hand. She has burned men before. She has watched cities light the horizon and felt no flicker of remorse. But she stops at one pyre, and she does not move for a long while, because the body laid upon it is Sir Jorah Mormont, who died with his back to her, defending the space where she stood. She lowers the torch. The flame catches the oil-soaked wood and climbs, and she watches it take him, and her face does not crumple, and her hands do not shake, because grief in her has never manifested as weakness. It has always transmuted into something colder and more precise, something like resolve. She has lost the man who loved her without condition, and in the burning of him, she makes a private vow. She will not have his death mean nothing. She came into this world to take back what was stolen from her house, and one enemy in the ice is dead, and one enemy in the south remains. Cersei Lannister sits the Iron Throne with her armies intact and her coffers full, and her people bled white by winter. Daenerys watches Jorah burn, and she thinks of King's Landing. She does not weep, she calculates. In the warmth of a solar far from the pyres, two men who understand the shape of the board better than anyone are already moving pieces. Tyrion pours wine with the deliberation of a man who has learned that every conversation in this castle is a wager. Varys watches him do it. and neither of them speaks the true subject aloud for some time, because both know that the true subject is treason, no matter how it is dressed. The Night King is dead. That is the fact that changes everything. As long as the dead marched, the question of who would rule the living was academic, a luxury no one could afford to indulge. Now the ice has melted from that question, and beneath it lies the same old problem that has poisoned this continent for 1,000 years. Who sits the throne? Varys speaks of exhaustion, of a queen who has lost 2 dragons and a fleet, and now her oldest friend, of a queen who burned her enemies at Highgarden and outside the walls of King's Landing before this war ever began. Tyrion answers that she has also shown restraint, that she came north when she owed the North nothing, that she is a better ruler than the one who wears the crown now. They are testing each other. Each man is measuring how far the other will go, and how far he himself is willing to follow, and both understand that a wrong measurement here ends with a head on a spike. Tyrion says her name and means her claim. Varys says nothing and means everything. The wine sits untouched between them, and the fire burns low, and neither man commits, because to commit too early is to lose the game before it begins. High on the battlements, husband and wife walk together in the clean, cold air. Jon and Daenerys move slowly, both of them wounded, both of them changed by the night that made them saviors of a world that has barely begun to thank them. They are married now, and marriage between them was meant to bind 2 armies into one purpose. And now, the purpose that bound them is dead in the snow, and the marriage remains. They speak of the South. They speak of Cersei, of the throne, of the promise Daenerys has carried across an ocean and a continent, and the deaths of so many she loved. Jon takes her hand. He tells her he will ride south with her, that the North answered her call, and the North will not abandon her now, that what they save together, they will rule together. It is the answer of a man in love, and the answer of a man who does not yet understand what he has agreed to. Daenerys hears it as a vow, the exhausted queen who lit her oldest friend's pyre with her own hand, feels something ease in her, because for the first time in a long while, she is not alone in her ambition. She has a king beside her, and he has said yes. But there is another watcher in Winterfell, and she watches everything. Sansa Stark finds her brother before the plans harden into orders. She does not speak of love, she speaks of numbers. The Dothraki are broken, their screamers halved and their horses lost. The Unsullied who survived are bleeding and frozen, and fewer than the maps say they should be. The northern houses have buried half their men in those pyres, and the survivors are starving. To march south now, she tells Jon, immediately, into the teeth of a fresh southern army that never spent a single soldier fighting the dead, is to throw away everything they just clawed back from the abyss. She does not phrase it as a warning against the queen, though it is one. She phrases it as arithmetic, because arithmetic is harder to argue with than suspicion. Jon listens. Jon, who has never wanted a crown, or a throne, or the game at all, hears his sister count the cost of his wife's ambition, and for the first time since the battle ended, a doubt takes root in him. He does not answer her at once. He looks out over the pyres still burning in the yard below, over the smoke rising toward a sky that has forgotten how to be blue, and he understands that the war he thought was over has only changed its shape, and that the hardest choices were never the ones the dead demanded of him. What if the truth of a man's birth arrived not as a weapon, but as a burden he could choose to carry? What if the secret that might have shattered everything came, instead, at the one moment it could bind rather than break? Consider the crypts beneath Winterfell, where the kings of winter sit in stone, and the cold does not lift even now that the dead have been put down. Bran waits there, in his chair, beside the sightless statue of the woman who was his aunt and Jon's mother. Sam stands nearby, hands folded, a man who has read too much and understood too late what he was reading. They have rehearsed this in silence. They have waited, and when Jon comes down the worn stone steps, torch in hand, he descends into a truth that has been waiting for him longer than he has been alive. Sam speaks first. He tells him of a marriage no one recorded and a birth no one witnessed, of a mother named Lyanna and a father named Rhaegar, of a name Jon has never worn, Aegon. He watches the word land. He watches Jon's face refuse it, then falter, then still. And Bran, who feels nothing and sees everything, confirms what Sam has only inferred. He does not soften it. He states it as a fact, drawn from the great river of all facts he now inhabits. Jon is not a bastard. Jon is not Ned Stark's son. Jon is the true-born heir to the Iron Throne, the elder claimant, the last legitimate line of a dynasty everyone believed extinguished. Here is where the game turns. Here is where the old design, the one that would have made Jon a rival, comes apart in the hands of the men who deliver it, because Jon is already wed, because the crown he might contest sits, at least in part, already upon his own head by marriage. The revelation does not create a competitor for Daenerys. It creates something far stranger. It makes her husband her senior in blood. Sam has thought of this. Sam has thought of little else. He came expecting to hand Jon a claim, and instead finds himself handing him a complication with no clean edge. If Jon were unwed, the truth would be a knife. He could be raised up against her, or she could be set against him, and the realm would split along the seam of their competing claims. But they share a bed and a cause and a war they have just barely survived together. The knife has no one to cut. Jon sits with it. He sits in the cold beside his mother's stone face, and he does the arithmetic Sansa taught him only hours before, though he applies it now to a different sum. He calculates what the truth is worth and to whom. He understands, with the slow clarity of a man who has never wanted power and therefore sees it more plainly than those who crave it, that this secret is only dangerous in the hands of someone who wishes to use it. It is a wedge, only if a wedge is what one goes looking for, and Jon has spent his whole life refusing to look for such things. He rises. He tells Sam and Bran that the truth will not stay buried, because truths of this weight never do, and that when it surfaces, he would rather it come from his own mouth than from a whisper in a rival's ear. He will tell Daenerys himself, not as a challenge, not as a claim, as a thing they now both hold, the way they hold everything else since the vows were spoken. He does not phrase it as strategy, though it is the shrewdest strategy available to him. He phrases it as honesty, because honesty is the only ground he has ever been able to stand on without slipping. Sam, who feared this moment, feels the fear ease into something like hope. Bran says nothing, because Bran already knows how the conversation will unfold and has chosen not to burden his brother with the knowing. But the crypts are not the only room in Winterfell where this truth will be measured. Sansa finds Jon before he can find his wife. She has heard enough, guessed enough, read enough in the faces of men who cannot keep secrets from a woman who has learned to read faces to survive. She does not ask him whether it is true. She asks him what he intends to do with it. Consider the two of them in the narrow passage, torchlight throwing their shadows long against the stone. Sansa lays it out the way she lays out everything now, cold and precise, each word a piece moved with intent. He is the heir. Not to the North alone, but to all of it. The North followed Ned Stark's son. The North bent the knee to a Stark. If they knew the man they crowned in their hearts was Targaryen by blood, and Targaryen by marriage both. If they knew the queen they distrust holds the second claim, while their own Jon holds the first, then everything shifts. The truth is leverage. The truth is a lever long enough to move the whole realm. And levers, she reminds him, are wasted when they are not used. Jon hears her. He hears the shape of the argument, and he does not pretend it is foolish, because it is not. He simply refuses it. He tells her he will not let the truth divide him from Daenerys. He will not let a name he never asked for become a blade laid between husband and wife. He will not play the game she is asking him to play, not because he cannot see the board, but because he has decided which piece he wishes to be. Sansa studies him for a long moment. She sees loyalty where she hoped to find ambition, and she does not know yet whether that loyalty is a strength or the fatal flaw that will undo them all. She does not argue further. She files it away, the way she files everything, and she watches her brother turn toward the tower where the Dragon Queen waits, carrying a truth that could crown him or destroy him, choosing to lay it not at the feet of his own ambition, but into the hands of the woman he has bound his life to. He climbs the stairs. He does not yet know what she will do with it. What if the most dangerous secret in the realm were not a weapon at all, but a gift, offered freely to the one person who had every reason to fear it? This is the question that hangs in the air of that darkened chamber as Jon steps through the door and finds Daenerys waiting by the fire, her silver hair catching the light, her eyes turning toward him with the quiet attention of a woman who has learned to read the weather of a man's face before he speaks a word. He does not delay. He has never been good at delay. He tells her plainly, the way a soldier reports a wound, that he is not the son of Ned Stark. He is the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, born of a marriage kept secret, hidden away in a southern tower, while a war raged to reclaim a woman everyone believed stolen. He tells her that his name was never Jon at all, that Eddard Stark carried a lie across a continent to keep an infant alive. He tells her that by blood, he stands nearer the Iron Throne than she does. And then he watches the words land. She does not weep. She does not rage. What crosses her face first is older than either, a thing she has carried since she was a girl sold across the narrow sea, since she learned that every hand extended toward her might close around her throat. It is fear, not of him precisely, but of what he represents. All her life, she has been the last Targaryen, the blood of the dragon, singular, unrepeatable, the final ember of a fire the world tried to smother. Her claim has been the one thing no man could take from her, because it was not a title granted, but a birthright written into her very bones. And now, in the space of a single confession, she is no longer the last. She is no longer the only. There is another, and this other is a man, and men have always been preferred to women in the counting of crowns. She turns the problem over the way she turns over everything, methodically, weighing each edge. If he speaks this truth in the wrong hall, before the wrong lords, her armies could melt from her like frost in the sun. Westeros does not love a foreign queen born in exile. Westeros loves a Stark who fought the dead, a man they have already followed into the dark. She sees the board clearly, more clearly perhaps than he does, and for one cold moment she calculates what it would cost to silence him. But he has not come to threaten. That is the thing she keeps circling back to, the piece that does not fit the pattern she has spent a lifetime expecting. He has not come as a rival laying down terms. He has come as a husband, laying a secret into her hands, as one might lay down a sword before a monarch, hilt first. He does not ask her to bow. He tells her, in that plain northern voice that has never learned to flatter, that whatever his blood makes him, it is now hers as well. They are married. What is his is hers, and what is hers is his, and the claim that might have divided them has instead been welded together in a single bed, a single vow. And slowly, she begins to understand the shape of what he is offering. She had feared to lose everything. Instead, she stands to gain what she never possessed. For all her fire, and her dragons, and her armies, her claim has always carried a shadow of doubt, the whisper that the throne passes through the male line, that a woman rules only where no man remains to contest her. But here is a man of purer claim than any Baratheon or Lannister, and he is bound to her by law and by love, and he does not want the throne without her upon it beside him. His blood does not diminish hers, it completes it. Together, they are not two rivals, but one house restored, the male line and the female line braided into a single unbreakable cord, the last two dragons ruling not in competition, but in concert. She reaches for his hand. She holds it a long moment, and when she speaks, it is not of surrender, but of alliance, and the fear in her eyes has cooled into something like resolve. Elsewhere in the castle, the news travels as such news always does, carried in whispers to the men whose business is whispers. Tyrion learns of it first, and Varys not long after, and the two of them understand at once what has happened, though they understand it differently. Varys had kept the truth of Jon's parentage as a spider keeps a strand of silk, delicate, invisible, a line of leverage he might one day pull to reweave the whole tapestry of succession in his favor. He had imagined a moment when he might set Jon against Daenerys, when he might whisper to the lords that here was a better king, a truer king, a king born of Westeros rather than exile. That was the play. That was always the play. But a secret shared willingly between husband and wife is no longer leverage. It is no longer his to pull. The silk has been cut. Whatever advantage the truth might have offered has dissolved the moment Jon carried it up those stairs and gave it away. And Varys sits in the dim light of his chamber and recognizes, with the weary precision of a man who has lost many such games, that this particular scheme is dead. He does not mourn it long. He simply files it away, folds his hands, and reconsiders the board. By the time the fire has burned low in the royal chamber, an understanding has been forged that no whisper can now undo. They will rule together. King and queen, not one above the other, their claims joined so completely that to challenge one is to challenge both. Centuries of dynastic uncertainty, of usurpers and pretenders, and disputed successions collapse into the simple arithmetic of a marriage bed. Two dragons, one house, one throne shared between them. And somewhere below, in the cold and the dark, an army of the dead is marching south toward Winterfell, indifferent to crowns, and neither king nor queen yet knows how little time remains before the true reckoning begins. What if a marriage, sealed in the cold heart of the North, could remake not only a bloodline, but a war? What if the small choices made in the days after that union, who stays, who marches, who watches the skies, determined whether two dragons lived or died before they ever reached the walls of King's Landing? The host departs Winterfell beneath a sky the color of iron. It moves like a great slow river of steel and horseflesh, unspooling through the southern gate and onto the King's Road. And behind it, the towers of the ancient castle recede into mist. At the head of that column ride the king and queen of the joined houses, and behind them ride the Unsullied in their ordered ranks, the Dothraki in their loose and restless swarm, the Northmen, who follow not a Targaryen, but a Stark who happens to wear a Targaryen name. This distinction matters. Jon understands that it matters. He has built the entire settlement of the North upon it. He leaves Sansa as wardeness in his stead, and the decision is a calculation as precise as any Tyrion has ever admired. Consider what the alternative would have cost. A southern castellan installed over Winterfell would have curdled northern loyalty within a fortnight. A Targaryen governor would have been worse. But a Stark, the eldest true-born daughter of Eddard Stark, a woman the North watched grow from a child into a survivor, she holds the loyalty of the great houses without a single dragon at her back. Sansa does not want him to go. She says so plainly. In the Solar, the morning of the departure, she tells him the southern lords will smile and lie, and bury a knife in him the moment his dragons look elsewhere. He tells her he knows. She tells him a queen's love is a thin shield against a lifetime of habit. He tells her he knows that too, and then he leaves, because the dead have already forced the question, and because a war on two fronts cannot be won by a king who hides behind his sister's counsel forever. Sansa watches the column vanish from the highest rampart, her hands folded, her mind already moving through the granaries and the levees, and the winter that has not yet released its grip. She has been given the North. She intends to hold it. South of the neck, the character of the war changes, and the change flows outward from the woman at its center. Tyrion watches Daenerys with the wariness of a man who has read her father's history and cannot entirely forget it. He fears the fire in her. He has always feared it. He remembers the Tarleys burning on the field, remembers the light in her eyes when the flames climbed, and he has spent long nights calculating the arithmetic of what happens when a queen with a grievance and a dragon arrives beneath the walls of a city that has wronged her. So he speaks to her carefully. He speaks of the small folk. He speaks of what it means to win a throne only to rule over ash. And here the marriage reveals its true weight, because Daenerys does not answer him as the woman who burned the Tarleys. She answers as a woman tempered by grief, by love, by the steady northern counsel of a man who has spent his life learning that a crown means nothing if the people beneath it starve. She tells Tyrion that she will not burn the city. She tells him this campaign will be disciplined, that the small folk are not her enemy, that Cersei is the enemy, and Cersei alone. She says it not as a promise to soothe him, but as a strategy. And this is the crucial thing. She frames mercy as tactics. A queen who spares the innocent inherits their loyalty. A queen who burns them inherits their hatred. Jon has taught her to see it this way, and Tyrion, listening, feels a small and unfamiliar thing unclench in his chest. Hope, perhaps, or something adjacent to it. But it is on the water that the great divergence comes. Jon Snow has spent his life against enemies who kill from ambush. The wildlings taught him. The Night's Watch taught him. The dead most of all taught him that the greatest danger is the one you do not see coming. So when the fleet sails south to carry the host and the queen's people, Jon insists upon a discipline the Targaryen war has never before observed. Constant reconnaissance. Dragons in the air by day, wheeling wide, watching the horizon. Fast scouting vessels ranging ahead of the main fleet, out beyond the curve of the sea. He does not trust open water. He has told Daenerys so, and she, having lost too much already to trust and to surprise, has agreed. And this is why, when Euron Greyjoy's fleet coils in the lee of the coast to spring its trap, the trap does not spring. In the war that might have been, Euron struck from nowhere. Bolts of black iron tore a dragon from the sky. A queen wept over a corpse of scale and smoke, and a fleet burned, and captives were dragged in chains toward King's Landing. That war turned on a single ambush. But here the scouts see the masts. Here the outriding vessels signal back before the Iron Fleet can close the distance. Here Daenerys hears the warning while there is still water between her and the enemy. And here she does not fly blind into a wall of bolts. She flies knowing. She and Jon both. Two dragons rising with the sun at their backs, striking not into an ambush but out of one. And Euron, who counted on surprise, who built his entire gambit upon the certainty that no one would see him coming, finds his ships aflame before a single scorpion can be aimed. The reversal is total. The hunter becomes the hunted. Euron's fleet breaks and scatters, running for the safety of Dragonstone, with its holds emptied of the victory it had promised. And behind it, the sea burns with the wreckage of his ambition. Both dragons survive. Both queen and king survive. The siege that comes will begin with two dragons in the sky rather than one. And this single altered fact, the fruit of a bastard's paranoia and a queen's trust, reshapes every calculation that follows. Aboard the flagship, Jon lands hard upon the deck, dismounts, and finds Daenerys already there, breathless, her eyes bright, and neither of them yet speaks of what they both understand. They were meant to lose this day. They did not. Consider the arithmetic of it, the cold sum that Euron never bothered to complete. He had come to the water not to win a battle, but to erase a piece from the board. And the piece he meant to erase was Rhaegal. One dragon fewer, one less shadow over King's Landing, one less reason for Cersei to fear the days ahead. That was the whole of his design. A single bolt, well placed, driven through the throat of a beast that could not see it coming. And in the world that might have been, he succeeded. In that other world, the dragon fell into the sea, and a ship was taken, and a woman with quiet eyes and quicker wisdom was dragged in chains to the gates of the city she had crossed the world to reach. That was the price of surprise. That was what surprise buys when it is total. But surprise, once spent, cannot be spent again. And here, it was spent early, spent uselessly, spent by the wrong side. The fire that took Euron's ships took them cleanly. There is a particular horror in watching a fleet burn from above. The way the flames leap from deck to deck faster than any man can run. The way the pitch and tar and dry timber drink the dragon fire as if they had been waiting for it. Sailors leap into the water, and the water gives them no mercy. For the sea around a burning ship is not a refuge but a graveyard warmed by the heat above it. Euron's oarsmen pull at their benches. His archers loose bolts that vanish into smoke. And the great scorpions, the machines built for exactly this hour, sit half-cranked and unaimed, their crews staring upward at two shapes that should have been one, that should have been vulnerable, that should have flown blind into the teeth of the trap. They are neither one nor blind. They are two, and they know. Missandei is not on those ships. Hold that thought a moment, for it matters more than the burning fleet, more than the drowned crews, more than the whole of Euron's shattered gambit. In the world that was, she was taken here, taken and marched, and made a message, made a lesson, made the final cruelty that hardened Daenerys past the point of return. Her death was not merely a death, it was a lever. It was the fulcrum upon which a queen's mercy was pried loose and cast into the sea, the moment after which Daenerys stopped listening to counsel and started listening only to the fire in her own chest. Remove that lever, remove that single loss, and you remove the wound that never healed, the grief that curdled into something colder than grief. She stands on the deck of the flagship now, whole, unharmed, her chains never forged, and she does not know, she cannot know, how much turns upon her survival, but the story knows, the calculation knows. A queen who keeps her closest friend is a queen who keeps a voice in her ear that speaks of restraint, of patience, of the difference between conquest and slaughter. That voice will matter in the days to come. That voice was silenced too early, once. It is not silenced now. Daenerys looks at Jon across the smoking deck, and there is a question in her face that neither of them asks aloud. What was this, truly? A skirmish? An omen? A gift? She had come to Westeros with 3 dragons and lost one to the ice north of the wall, and the loss had made her cautious in a way that did not suit her, made her count her strength and find it wanting. Now she has looked into a trap and walked out of it with everything she brought into it. 2 dragons alive, 2 armies whole, a fleet destroyed that was meant to destroy her. And for the first time since she set foot on this shore, the arithmetic runs in her favor, and she can feel it running, the momentum returning to her like blood to a limb gone numb. He wanted Rhaegal, she says at last, and her voice is steady. He wanted a dragon. He built this whole snare for a single dragon. Jon wipes soot from his brow, and got nothing, and got nothing. She turns the words over. She is thinking now the way she thinks best, forward, across the board, past the burning water to the walls that wait beyond it. Cersei expected to receive good news. She expected Euron to come to her with a dragon dead and a queen humbled. What comes to her instead? Neither of them answers, because the answer is obvious and terrible and theirs. What comes to Cersei instead is silence, the absence of the messenger she was promised, the slow, dawning understanding that the fleet she counted upon has not returned, will not return, is scattered across the sea in charred fragments and drowned men. She will wait for word, and the word will not come, and in that waiting she will begin, at last, to be afraid. Not the performed fear she shows her court, but the real thing, the animal thing, the recognition that the pieces she thought she controlled have slipped from her hand. The host reassembles. There is discipline in it now, a confidence that flows downward from the 2 figures on the flagship deck, through the captains and the sergeants and the common soldiers who saw the fire in the sky and understood what it meant. They had followed a queen who had lost a dragon and married a king who was said to be dead once already, and they had wondered, quietly, in the way soldiers wonder, whether they march toward victory or toward some slower catastrophe. Now they do not wonder. Now they have seen 2 dragons rise together and break an enemy fleet before breakfast, and the wondering has burned away with Euron's ships. The march resumes toward King's Landing, 2 living dragons in the sky, unbloodied armies on the road, a queen and a king who share a bed and a purpose, and, more dangerously for their enemies, a command that does not fracture. Cersei sits in her red keep, counting a defense built against a weaker foe than the one now approaching, and she does not yet know how much weaker her position has become, but she is beginning to suspect. And on the road north of the city, someone rides ahead with a message she will not want to hear. What if the strongest position on the board is also the most brittle? Cersei Lannister has spent her life understanding power as a fixed quantity, a thing measured in gold and men, and the fear she can command. And now she sits in the Red Keep watching that arithmetic collapse in a single morning. The Iron Fleet is gone. Euron's promise of 100 ships is smoke on the water off the southern coast, and the raven that carries the news reaches her before her breakfast has cooled. She reads it twice. She does not weep, and she does not rage, not visibly, because rage is a currency she has learned to spend only when it purchases something. Instead, she calculates. This is what she does. This is all she has ever done. The Golden Company remains. 20,000 sellswords bought with a debt she intends never to repay, mercenaries who fight for coin and will not stay to burn, but who stand between her walls and the armies marching south. And beneath the city, older and more patient than any sellsword, wait the caches, wildfire, the green substance that the Mad King had loved, hidden in the tunnels and the sept foundations and the muck beneath the streets, enough to turn King's Landing into a lake of fire should the walls ever fall. Aerys had meant to burn it all, rather than yield it. His daughter now flies toward those same walls, and Cersei, seated in her solar with the letter in her hand, begins to think thoughts that would have made even the Mad King pause. Qyburn comes to her, as he always comes, soft-footed and smiling, and utterly without conscience. He does not counsel patience. He counsels leverage. The city is full of people, he observes, hundreds of thousands of them, the small folk who cook and beg and starve and breed within these walls, and the Dragon Queen has built her entire claim upon the notion that she comes to free them. What if, he suggests, they were placed between her and her prize? What if the Mother of Dragons were made to choose between her throne and the very subjects she claims to save? Cersei listens. She understands immediately. It is elegant in the way that only the cruelest solutions are elegant, and she has never been squeamish about cruelty when cruelty serves her. She gives the order. The small folk are to be herded into the Red Keep and the streets beneath it, packed into the courtyards and the plazas, a living wall of the poor and the desperate, arranged around her person like sandbags around a powder store. If Daenerys wishes to take the city, she must burn the people she came to liberate, and a queen who burns her future subjects is no liberator at all. She is only another tyrant with a larger dragon. Cersei has watched enough of her enemies destroy themselves to know the value of a trap that forces the enemy to choose between two defeats. She is betting on Daenerys's mercy. This is the strange and terrible core of her plan. She is wagering everything on the compassion of the woman she despises, gambling that the girl who freed slaves in the East will flinch from immolating the small folk in the West, and that in the flinching there will be hesitation, and in the hesitation there will be time, and time is the one commodity Cersei still believes she can win. Lannister gold outlasts armies. Walls outlast enthusiasm. Let the invaders sit before the gates while the city rots and the mob turns and winter bites, and perhaps the greatest army in Westeros will starve itself into disarray outside a city it dares not touch. But there is a flaw in the plan, and the flaw has a name, and the name is Jaime. He learns of the wildfire from a slip of the tongue and a look that lingers too long, from Qyburn's careful evasions and a servant's terrified whisper, and once he begins to suspect, the whole shape of it assembles itself before him with sickening clarity. He knows those caches. He knows them the way a man knows his own crime. He was there, years ago, kneeling in the throne room with the Mad King's blood on his hands, having driven his sword through the back of the very man who meant to set that fire and turn every living soul in this city to ash and screaming. He earned a name that day, Kingslayer, Oathbreaker. He wore the contempt of the realm for an act that had saved 500,000 lives, and he never told them why, because the telling would have sounded like an excuse, and Jaime Lannister does not make excuses. Now his sister proposes the same fire, his sister, whom he has followed and loved and killed for, and betrayed his own honor for, times beyond counting. His sister, whose child he fathered, and whose ambitions he served without question, because serving her had become the only truth he possessed. He stands in the corridor outside her chambers, and he cannot make his hand move to the door. The choice he faces is not a choice a man survives whole. On one side stands the woman, who is the whole architecture of his life, the sun around which every other loyalty has orbited. On the other stand the innocent, the nameless multitude, the same faces he once knelt in blood to save. He killed a king to prevent this fire. Is he now to serve a queen who would light it? He remembers the smell of it, the green flame, the way it clings and does not stop. He remembers Eris whispering, "Burn them all," and how the whisper had unmade a kingdom, and he understands, standing there with his golden hand hanging useless at his side, that his sister has become the thing he once slew a king to prevent, and that he has been too much in love to see it until this moment. He does not open the door. He turns and walks the long stone passage toward the outer yards, where the small folk are already being driven through the gates like cattle, mothers clutching children, old men stumbling, the crush of the poor arranged around the powder that will kill them. He watches them file past. He counts them without meaning to, the way he counts everything, and every number is a life his sister has already spent. Somewhere beneath his boots the caches wait in their patient dark, and Jaime Lannister, who has never in his life failed to know which side he stood upon, feels the ground of his certainty crack open beneath him. What if mercy, offered honestly, could still be read as weakness by the one who needed it most? This is the question that sits beneath the terms Jon and Daenerys draft together in the northern camp, in a tent lit by tallow and the low glow of a brazier, the two of them bent over the same table, their words shaped by two minds working as one. They do not demand the whole of the city. They do not demand blood. They ask for a single thing, and they ask for it plainly. Cersei Lannister must lay down her crown. The small folk are to be spared. The bannermen who bent knee to her may bend knee again without loss of head or holdings. This is the offer, and it is a restrained offer, and the restraint is not accident. It is the fruit of a marriage. Daenerys, who once might have flown to the walls and reduced them to slag, has learned to hear the counsel of a man who does not confuse power with cruelty. Jon, who once might have thrown himself at the gates in righteous fury, has learned to let strategy do the work of the sword. Together, they have arrived at something neither would have reached alone, and so the terms go south under a peaceful banner, carried in the careful hands of Tyrion Lannister, who knows his sister better than any living soul and hopes, against the weight of that knowledge, that she might choose to live. He should have known better. He does know better. He simply hopes anyway, which is the last vice of a clever man. The envoy who rides ahead of him is a northern noble of middling name, a man chosen precisely because he is expendable to no one and valuable to all, a herald under the oldest law of parley, protected by every custom that has ever governed war between civilized houses. He carries the terms in a sealed letter. He carries the twin sigil of wolf and dragon on a white field. He carries the assumption, reasonable and ancient, that a man who comes to speak does not die for speaking. Cersei has him killed at the gate. She does it in the open, where the walls are thick with watchers, where her own soldiers stand in ranks and the small folk press behind them. She does it deliberately, and this is the crucial thing to understand about the act, because it is not rage. It is argument. She is making a case. She is telling the city, and telling the men who defend it, and telling the enemy beyond the walls that she does not negotiate, that she cannot be reasoned toward surrender, that the only path forward runs through her utterly or not at all. She believes that mercy invites contempt. She believes that a queen who accepts terms has already lost. And so she answers an offer of restraint with the head of the man who carried it, and she watches the body fall and feels, for a moment, the cold satisfaction of a woman who has proven her point. But she has miscalculated. She has always been brilliant at wounding and blind to consequence. And here the two collide. The men on the walls do not see strength. They see a monarch who has spent the last coin of her legitimacy. A herald slain under a banner of peace is a thing that curdles in the stomach of even a hardened soldier, because every soldier knows that the customs of war exist to protect him too. That the day heralds may be murdered is the day no man is safe under any flag. And so a quiet begins to move through the garrison. Not mutiny, not yet, but a question, passed in glances, whispered in guardrooms, weighed in the long watches of the night. How much longer? How much longer do we die for this? How much longer before her cause becomes our grave? Tyrion watches the head fall from a distance he cannot cross, and something in him closes like a door. He had hoped. Now he does not hope. He calculates instead, which is the thing he does when hope has failed him, and the calculation leads him, that same night, through channels only he still knows, to a meeting he has been dreading and delaying and needing all at once. He meets Jaime in the dark, in a place where no candle burns and no ear listens, and he does not waste words on greeting. He speaks of the wildfire. He speaks of the caches beneath the streets, the green death waiting in its patient jars, the small folk arranged above it like kindling laid for a hearth. He speaks of the man Jaime used to be, or the man Tyrion has always believed him to be, beneath the gold and the glib cruelty, the boy who once wanted to be Sir Arthur Dane and settled, instead, for infamy. And then he says, the thing he has come to say, the thing that hangs in the black air between them. Open the gates, disable the caches, save the people your sister would burn. Jaime does not answer at once. He is thinking of a throne room, years gone, of a mad king whispering, of the weight of a sword driven into a spine that no oath could justify defending, and of the name he has carried ever since. The name that made him a punchline and a warning and a broken thing. He is thinking that he swore, once, to guard kings, and that he broke that oath to guard a city, and that the world never forgave him for choosing the many over the one. And now the choice returns. It has circled all this way back to him, wearing his sister's face. He thinks of Cersei. He thinks of the ground beneath the outer yards and the numbers he counted, without meaning to. He thinks that he has loved her his whole life, and that love has made him complicit in something he swore his soul against. He does not finish the thought. He does not need to. He looks at his brother in the dark, and something old and buried stirs behind his eyes, and when he speaks, his voice is very low. I will try, he says. I do not know if I can reach them all, but I will try. And in the deep beneath the city, the caches wait, and the hours begin, quietly, to run out. What if the difference between mercy and massacre came down to a matter of minutes, of positioning, of who reached which chamber first? What if the whole history of a city, of a dynasty, of a queen's soul, balanced on the edge of a blade, held by a one-handed man in the dark? Consider the geometry of that morning. The Golden Company arrayed before the gates in their disciplined ranks, 20,000 sellswords who had never broken a contract, who did not know that the walls they defended were mined from beneath with the very fire meant to be their salvation. Consider the scorpions bristling from the battlements, each one a promise made to a dead man's engineering, each one calibrated to punch through dragonhide at range. And consider the two dragons rising with the sun behind them, coming not from the sea where the scorpions were aimed, but from the ridgeline to the east, from the angle no defender had planned for, because Daenerys had learned, at last, the lesson that cost her a child. She comes low and fast, and she does not hesitate. Drogon takes the first battery of scorpions in a single pass, the fire washing across the stone in a line so precise it might have been drawn with a ruler, and the men serving those engines are gone before they understand they are dying. Rhaegal takes the second. This is the thing the histories would note, not the destruction, but its discipline. She burns the weapons that can kill her dragons, and she burns the men who serve them, and then she pulls up, wheeling above the field, and she does not touch the city behind the walls. She had made a pact. She had knelt in a cold room in the north and promised the man she married that she would fight a war and not a slaughter. And the promise held because someone was there to hold it, because the voices around her had not all been silenced, because the woman who might have whispered vengeance into her ear was alive and whispering restraint instead. The Golden Company breaks in the field, not because sellswords lack courage, but because courage is a currency, and no contract in the world is worth standing beneath a dragon. They scatter through the wreckage of the outer defenses, and the gates fall, blasted from their hinges by a single sustained torrent, and the way into King's Landing lies open. This is the moment. This is where the old story turned. This is where a queen looked down upon a city that had refused her, a city that had murdered her friend and starved her cause and hidden her enemies, and chose to make it ash. But that is not this story. In this story, the city holds its breath and does not know how close it stands to the flame, because far beneath its streets, a man is running. Jaime moves through the tunnels with Tyrion's map alive in his mind, the diagrams his brother had sketched by candlelight, the locations of the caches Cersei had ordered planted in the months of her final paranoia. He finds the first beneath the sept, jars of green fire nested like eggs in the dark, and he does what his brother told him, working the fuses free, with fingers that remember, absurdly, the feel of a lute, of a sword, of everything a hand once was. He does not think about the man he killed to save this city the first time. He thinks about the count. There are 7 primary caches, and he has perhaps an hour, and he does not know if the assault above will trigger them before he reaches the last. He moves faster. His breath saws in the confined dark. He finds the second beneath the dragon pit, and the third beneath the guild hall, and each one he disarms is 1,000 lives, 10,000 lives, a whole quarter of the city that will wake tomorrow instead of burning tonight, and he counts them without meaning to, the way he counted the men in the yard, because some part of him has always been counting the cost of the things love made him do. Above, the bells begin. They ring first from the Red Keep, and then from the sept, and then from tower after tower across the terraced hills, the sound rolling out over the smoking gates and the broken field, the ancient signal that a city has laid down its arms. In the old telling, this sound was a trigger, a provocation, a thing that snapped something in a grieving queen and turned surrender into pretext. But the woman circling above on her dragon is not the woman that story made her. She has slept beside a husband who loves her. She has eaten at a table with a friend she did not lose. She has been surrounded by advisors who did not die or defect but stayed, and argued, and pulled her back from the edge again and again until the pulling became habit, until restraint became a thing she practiced rather than a thing she abandoned. She hears the bells. Her hand tightens on nothing because there are no reins, only the will she presses down into the great beast beneath her. Drogon wants to descend. She can feel it in him, the hunger, the memory of every wrong the world has done her, the simple animal logic that says the enemy is beneath you and helpless, and the fire is right here. She holds him. She holds him the way you hold a scream behind your teeth, with everything you have, and she says a single word aloud, though no one can hear it over the wind and the wings, and the word is enough. Drogon pulls up. The city smokes but stands. The bells ring on, and beneath them, in the streets, people who do not yet know how narrowly they have lived begin, tentatively, to lift their heads. In the tunnels, Jaime reaches the 5th cache, and his knife slips on the fuse, and his heart stops, and then starts, and the fire does not come. He wipes his brow with the back of his good hand. 2 more. He can hear, faintly, muffled through fathoms of stone, the sound of bells, and he does not know yet what it means, whether it is triumph or the first note of catastrophe. He knows only the count that remains. He gathers himself in the dark and moves toward the 6th, and somewhere far above him, a queen, who did not become a monster, begins, slowly, to bring her dragon down. What if the man who once slew a king to save a city arrived in the throne room, not to save it again, but to end the woman who would have burned it? Consider the geometry of the moment. Jaime does not go to the crypts, where they had planned to meet, where escape waited in the form of a ship and a rowboat and a beach beyond the reach of dragons. He climbs instead. He climbs toward the sound of the bells, toward the great hall where the throne sits like a thing made of teeth, and he finds Cersei there, because she would be nowhere else. She would die in that room before she would die running. He understands this about her. He has always understood it. It is the thing he loved and the thing that damns them both. She turns when she hears his boots on the stone. For a heartbeat, there is joy in her face, unguarded, childlike, the look of a woman who believes rescue has come. Then she reads him. She has always been able to read him, and what she reads now is not rescue. The ship is waiting, she says. Not a question, a test, a move on the board to see how he answers. He does not answer at once. He measures the distance between them. He measures the years. He measures the weight of what she carries beneath her gown, the child that is his, the child that is the reason and the ruin of everything. "There is no ship for you," he says. Watch how she recalculates. Watch the mind that has outlasted 100 better minds begin, even now, to search for the angle. She comes toward him with her hands open, and she speaks of the babe, and she speaks of the 2 of them, always the 2 of them against all the world, the only pact she has ever kept. She says that they came into the world together and they will leave it together, and that no one else has ever mattered, and that he cannot mean to let her die. She is not wrong that she means every word. That is the terrible thing. She has never lied to him about this one truth. She loves him the only way she knows how, which is to say she loves him as a possession, as an extension of herself, as the last stone standing when all the others have fallen, and he chooses the realm. He does not choose it because he has become good. Jaime Lannister has no illusions about his own goodness. He chooses it because he has finally understood the arithmetic that Cersei never could. 1 life against 500,000. 1 love against a city of children who did not ask to be born beneath her reign. He has spent his whole life being called Kingslayer for the one time he did the sum correctly. And here, at the end, he does it again. He takes her wrists. He holds her. Gently, the way you hold something you are about to lose. And he does not let her go toward the passages she still believes will save her. They are coming, he tells her, and you will be here when they arrive. She screams at him then. She curses him with every foul name she owns, and she has many. And when the curses fail, she weeps. And when the weeping fails, she goes very still, and the stillness is worse. She looks at him the way one looks at a stranger wearing a familiar face. He holds her through all of it. He does not flinch. This is the last service he will ever perform for her, and it is the cruelest kindness he has ever given anyone. The doors open. What if a conqueror understood that mercy is a weapon sharper than any blade? Daenerys enters first, ash on her armor, Drogon's heat still radiating from her like a memory. Jon comes at her shoulder, and there is between them now a thing that was not there before, a steadiness, a shared center of gravity, the marriage that had begun as an alliance and become an anchor. She had come to this city on a dragon with fire in her heart, and the whole world had waited, breathless, to see whether she would burn it. She had not. She had pulled the dragon up, and the choice she makes now, standing before the woman who murdered her allies and gloated over the corpses of her friends, is the choice of a queen who intends to rule rather than merely to win. Take her alive, Daenerys says. Tyrion, entering behind them, hears the words and understands their weight before anyone else in the room. He had feared this moment for years. He had lain awake imagining it, the daughter of the Mad King standing over his sister with dragons at her back, and he had been certain how it would end. In fire, in the melting of stone, in the vindication of every whisper that a Targaryen could not be trusted with power. And instead, he hears mercy. Not weakness. Mercy as strategy. Mercy as statement. Mercy that tells every lord and small folk in the Seven Kingdoms that the age of monarchs who murder for pleasure has ended. He looks at his queen, and then he looks at his brother holding his sister, and then he looks at Jon Snow standing quiet and grave at Daenerys' side, and he understands, at last, what has changed. She is not alone anymore. She was never meant to conquer alone. The steadying hand she needed had come to her wearing the name of a bastard. Cersei is taken. Guards close around her, and she goes without dignity, spitting, promising deaths that will never come, and the sound of her voice grows smaller as they lead her from the hall to await the judgment that will be lawful and public and just. Jaime watches her go. He does not follow. He stands alone in the center of the throne room with his one good hand hanging empty at his side, and he does not weep, and he does not speak, and no one comes to him yet, because no one knows what he is. Beneath the Iron Throne, Jon and Daenerys stand together in the smoke and the silence, victorious, married, alive, and Tyrion, watching them, feels the first cold prickle of a new question rising in his mind, the question of what comes next, of who now must be reckoned with, of whether the crown they have won can be held. What if the true test of a conqueror comes not in the taking of a throne, but in the days that follow, when the sword is sheathed and the dragon rests, and the whole of a fractured realm turns to watch what will be done with the one who has been broken? Daenerys has crossed a sea and burned a fleet and shattered the walls of King's Landing, but none of that will define her reign in the memory of the lords who now wait beyond her doors. What defines her is Cersei. What defines her is the choice she makes with the life that lies at her feet. The trial is held in the throne room, and this is itself a decision, careful and deliberate. She might have had Cersei killed in a cell. She might have had it done in the night, quietly, and told the realm afterward. But Jon had counseled otherwise, and Tyrion had agreed. And so, the doors are opened, and the lords are summoned, and every witness who might carry the tale to the far corners of the Seven Kingdoms is placed where they can see. The judgment must be seen. A thing done in shadow is a thing that can be doubted, twisted, remade into rumor. A thing done in the open cannot be denied. Daenerys understands this. She has learned, at last, that power witnessed is power that endures, and power hidden is only fear. Cersei is brought in chains, and she does not bow. She stands before the twisted iron of the throne her father's house had held, and she looks at the woman who sits upon it now, with a hatred so pure it needs no words. Daenerys does not flinch from that gaze. She has looked into worse. She has looked into the eyes of masters and slavers, and men who meant to poison her, and she has learned to sit still beneath their loathing and let it break upon her like water on stone. The testimony begins. Tyrion speaks first, because he must, because he is the hand, and because he is her brother, and the weight of a brother's word against a sister carries a terrible authority. He recounts the deaths, one by one, laid at Cersei's feet. King Robert, dead in a hunting accident that was no accident. The lords of the realm, the Tyrells, the Sept of Baelor, consumed in green fire, while the highborn of the city knelt within it. He speaks of the wildfire caches still buried beneath the streets. The caches Cersei's father had hidden and her husband's madness had planted. The poison that had waited under the feet of 500,000 souls. He does not embellish. He does not need to. The facts are enough, and he lays them down like stones upon a scale. Jaime speaks next, and this is the moment the room has been waiting for, though few had dared expect it. He tells them of the wildfire. He tells them how he killed Aerys to stop the burning of the city, and how Cersei had reached, at the end, for the very fire he had died to prevent. He does not spare himself. He names his own crimes in the same breath as hers, and there is something in the room that shifts as he speaks, a recalibration, a sense that the old order is truly ending, that even the Kingslayer has come to stand on the side of a law that would bind him too. The Northern Lords speak of the wildfire plot that had nearly consumed them, of the treachery in the War of the Dead, of promises made and broken, while men died in the snow. Each voice adds another stone. The scale tips, and it does not tip back. And then it is done. The testimony is complete, and the room falls silent, and every eye turns to the throne, and Daenerys must decide. This is the moment. What if she does what her father would have done? What if she burns her? The dragon is close. The word is one syllable. Cersei has earned it 100 times over, has earned it in blood and fire and every death she caused, and no one in the room would call it unjust. The blood of Daenerys' own house cries out for it. The girl who watched her brother's crown melt across his skull knows what fire does to those who deserve it. But Jon stands beside her, and Jon has argued for imprisonment, and his argument was not made from mercy alone. It was made from strategy, though he would not name it so. A queen who burns her enemies is a queen the lords will fear. A queen who imprisons them is a queen the lords will trust. Fear wins battles. Trust wins reigns. Cersei dead is a martyr, a story the doubters will tell in the dark. Proof that the Dragon Queen is only Aerys reborn. Cersei alive, caged, forgotten, is a warning that costs nothing and proves everything. She rules by law. She rules by law, She rules by law, and the phrase must become the truth of her, repeated in every keep from Dorne to the Wall. Daenerys weighs it all. She weighs the justice she craves against the mercy that will define her, and she understands that they are not opposites, but the same thing wearing different faces, and the face she chooses will be the face the realm remembers. She rises, her voice does not shake. She sentences Cersei Lannister to imprisonment for the remainder of her natural life, in a cell beneath the Red Keep, where she will neither die a martyr nor live a queen, but simply endure, forgotten, until age takes what fire will not. The words fall into the silence and settle there, heavy and final. And something moves through the assembled lords, subtle as a change in the wind. The skeptics, the doubters, the men who had come expecting a conqueror's cruelty, exchange glances they think no one sees. This is not what they feared. This is law. This is a reign that might be lived under rather than merely survived. Tyrion watches it happen, watches the mood of the room turn like a tide, and he allows himself, for the first time, the smallest measure of hope. But even as Cersei is led back to her chains, Jaime remains standing in the center of the hall, unjudged, unnamed, and Daenerys' gaze finds him, and the question of what to do with the Kingslayer has not yet been asked. What if the hardest work of ruling begins not on the battlefield, but in the quiet hours after the last sword is sheathed? What if the true test of a crown is not how it is won, but how it is shared? Jaime Kingslayer stands beneath the Queen's gaze, and for a long moment, the hall holds its breath, and then Daenerys turns away, and the moment passes unresolved, deferred, filed among the 1,000 decisions that a new reign must make in its first fragile days. There will be time for the Kingslayer. There is no time for anything else, because a realm is not conquered. A realm is built. And Jon and Daenerys understand this in the days that follow, understand it the way a mason understands stone, that the weight above must be carried by the foundation below, or the whole structure falls. So they summon the surviving great houses to the Red Keep, the lords who bent the knee and the lords who merely watched, and they present themselves not as conqueror and consort, but as the reunited line, the two halves of a dynasty sundered by murder and now made whole by marriage. Two claims that might have divided the realm into decades of war, joined instead into one. There is no rival Targaryen to raise a banner against. There is no other blood to bleed. The very thing that might have torn Westeros apart has been, by a single ceremony in a snowbound godswood, transformed into the argument for peace. Tyrion watches the lords absorb this. He watches them do the arithmetic he has already done 100 times. A marriage ends a war before it begins. There is elegance in it, the kind of elegance that survives generations. And the men in the hall are not fools, and they see it too. He is confirmed as Hand. The Queen names him, and the King does not object, and Tyrion accepts with a bow that costs him more than the lords will ever know, because he has served monarchs before and buried the trust he gave them, and to reach for hope again is an act of will. But he reaches, and around him, the council takes shape, and it is here that the true design reveals itself, because Jon and Daenerys do not fill their small council with loyalists. They fill it with balance. Davos, the smuggler who counsels honesty, a man of the small folk who speaks for the small folk, Missandei, who knows the tongues and treaties of half the world, Samwell Tarly, who has read more than any maester in the Citadel and forgotten less, voices from the north and voices from the southern kingdoms, and each seat at that table a signal sent to every corner of the realm. The message is simple. This reign belongs to all of you, not to a faction, not to a dynasty, to the realm entire. And it is a calculated message. Of course it is, because Daenerys has learned what happens to a queen who rules through fear alone, has watched the doubt in 100 faces, and understood that fear buys obedience, but never loyalty. And loyalty is what a throne is made of when the dragons are gone. So she builds a council that looks like Westeros. And the lords who came expecting one master and one master's men find instead a table where their own voices might be heard. And the calculation lands, and the tide turns a little further toward peace. But the North has not come to bend the knee. The North sends Sansa Stark. She arrives at King's Landing wrapped in gray and white, the direwolf at her breast. And she does not come as a supplicant. She comes as a negotiator. And Tyrion, watching her enter the hall, thinks that of all the pieces on this board, she is the one he understands best and trusts least, because she has been broken and remade in the fires of this very city. And what emerged from that forge is something patient and cold and utterly without illusions. The debate that follows is the tensest of the new reign. Sansa does not raise her voice. She does not need to. She lays out the North's case with the precision of a woman who has rehearsed every word, that the North fought and bled while the South looked away, that the North remembers what Southern kings have brought them, that the wolves will not trade one distant master for another. Daenerys bristles at first, because to a queen, the very word autonomy sounds like the first crack in a wall, and cracks spread. Jon says little, caught as he has always been caught between the woman he married and the family that made him, and Tyrion watches the two women measure one another across the length of the council chamber, each one seeing in the other the thing she has learned to fear most. And then something shifts. Because Daenerys is a queen now, not a conqueror, and a queen must see further than the moment in front of her. To crush the North is to win a battle and plant the seed of the next rebellion. To grant it is to lose a measure of control and gain a stabilizing pillar, a warden whose loyalty, once earned, will hold the whole northern half of the realm in place. The choice is not between strength and weakness. The choice is between the appearance of strength and the reality of stability. And Daenerys, who has burned enough to know the difference, chooses stability. The North is granted autonomy within the realm. Sansa is named warden, her wardenship recognized, her people governed by their own laws under their own liege, bound to the Iron Throne, not by chains, but by common cause. It is a concession dressed as a gift, and a gift dressed as a concession. And both women know exactly what has been traded, and both women, in the same instant, understand that they have made an ally of one another rather than an enemy. Sansa inclines her head, not deeply, just enough, and the opposition that might have festered into war becomes, with that single gesture, a foundation stone of the new order. Tyrion exhales, one threat unmade. But even as the northern question settles into peace, a raven is already winging south from the wall, its message dark and urgent, and the man who reads it first goes very pale, and he does not yet know how to bring the news to a king and queen who believe the wars are finally done. The raven, as it happens, carries no news of war. The paleness of the man who reads it comes not from dread, but from grief, for the message concerns the dead who will not rise again, and there are so very many of them. What if the true cost of victory is not measured in the moment of triumph, but in the long accounting that follows, in the counting of the fallen, in the empty barracks and the unlit fires, and the names that no one will ever speak again? This is the arithmetic that a king and queen must now confront. Not the arithmetic of battle, the arithmetic of aftermath. Grey Worm stands upon the walls of Winterfell and looks north, though there is nothing north to look at now but snow and the memory of what the snow once concealed. His army is diminished, the Unsullied who marched from Meereen, who crossed the narrow sea, who held the line when the dead came pouring over the walls, in numbers that no living man could comprehend, are fewer now by more than half. He counts them in his mind, the way a shepherd counts a scattered flock, and the counting never comes out right, because the ones who are gone keep returning to the tally, and each time he must subtract them again, and each subtraction is a small death of its own. There is a question before him, and the question is this: what does a soldier become when the war is over? The Unsullied were made for war. They were bought for it, trained for it, named for it. They know nothing else, and yet the thing they knew is finished, and the woman who freed them stands upon the same walls with a crown upon her head and a choice in her open hand. She offers them lands. She offers them the freedom to go, to sail south and then east, to seek the island of Noth, where Missandei was born, where the people are peaceful and the butterflies drift like falling petals, the place Missandei dreamed of returning to before the dream was taken from her. Grey Worm considers it. He considers it for a long while, standing very still, his spear planted beside him, the wind moving through the courtyard below. He could go. He could take the survivors and sail toward that green and gentle shore and lay down his weapons and let the war be a thing that happened to another man in another life. Missandei would have wanted that. He believes she would have wanted that. But belief is a slippery thing, and grief distorts it, and he cannot know what she would have chosen, because she is not here to choose, and that absence is the wound that will not close. So he chooses differently. He chooses to stay, not out of love for war, for he has had enough of war to last 100 lifetimes, but because the fallen are buried here, in this cold northern ground so far from every home they ever knew, and to abandon them would be to let them die a second time. He will stay. He will help to build the thing they died to make possible. He will plant the fields and raise the walls, and teach the sons of the north how a free man holds a spear, and in the building of it, he will honor the dead by giving their sacrifice a shape that endures. It is not the choice Missandei dreamed of, but it is the choice that makes her dream worth something. Elsewhere in the castle, another farewell is taking shape, and this one is quieter, and this one wounds a king in a place that no sword ever reached. Arya Stark comes to Jon not as a soldier reporting to a commander, but as a sister come to say goodbye, and Jon knows before she speaks that this is what she has come to do, because he knows her, because he has always known her, and because there is a lightness in her that he has not seen since they were children in this same castle before the world broke apart. She tells him she is leaving, not to King's Landing, not to any court, not to any keep where lords and ladies bow and scheme and measure one another with narrowed eyes. She has never belonged in such places, and she will not pretend to now. There is a question that has haunted her since she was small, and the question is this: what lies west of Westeros, beyond the edge of every map, past the point where the known world simply stops and the mapmakers write nothing at all? No one knows. She intends to find out. She will build a ship or commission one, and she will sail into the blank space at the edge of the world, and she will discover what waits there. Jon does not try to stop her. There was a time, in another version of this story, when Arya's departure would have carried the sting of exile, when she would have fled a court that feared her and a family fractured beyond repair. Not now. Now she goes because she wishes to go, freely, at peace, and the difference is everything. He embraces her. He holds her the way a brother holds a sister he does not expect to see again, and neither of them weeps, because that is not their way, but something passes between them that is deeper than tears, and when she pulls back she is smiling, and he is smiling too, and it is a bittersweet thing, this parting, but it is not a broken thing. And while these private reckonings unfold within the walls of Winterfell, the larger reckoning of the realm goes on without pause. There are kingdoms still to bind. The Iron Islands, restless and reaving by nature, must be brought to heel or brought to terms. Dorne, proud and remote behind its mountains and its sands, must be persuaded that the new order serves it better than defiance. The Reach, wealthy and wounded, its great house nearly extinguished, must be given reason to swear rather than reason to resent. Envoys are dispatched, letters are sealed, and where the letters alone will not suffice, a dragon passes overhead, high and silent, a shadow that darkens no field, but that every lord below understands with perfect clarity. The message is patient, the message is unhurried, but beneath the patience lies the reminder, and the reminder is fire, and one by one the oaths begin to come. What if the deepest wound a person carries is not the one inflicted by an enemy, but the one whispered as a curse and believed ever after as a fact? Daenerys Targaryen has carried such a wound for years. She believed herself barren. She believed it the way one believes the ground is solid, without question, without re-examination, a truth so foundational that all her plans and all her fears were built upon it. "When the fires of my womb quicken," said the woman in the tent long ago, "when the sun rises in the west and sets in the east, when the seas go dry and the mountains blow in the wind like leaves, a curse cast in the shape of impossibility, and Daenerys took it into herself and made it certainty. She built her identity around it. The last dragon, the end of a line, a woman who would rule and then leave the world with no one of her blood to follow her. Consider what that certainty had cost her, quietly, in the private hours. She had loved men and lost them, and never once permitted herself to hope for the ordinary future that other women dared to want. She had learned to grieve a thing before it could exist, which is a particular and terrible discipline, and so when the signs come, the missed cycle, the strange tiredness that no rest can cure, the maester's careful examination, and his even more careful pronouncement, she does not immediately believe. She cannot. Belief in this direction requires the dismantling of a wall she built with her own hands over long years. She stands very still in the solar of Winterfell, the northern light falling gray and clean across the stone, and she asks the maester to say it again. He says it again. She asks him if he is certain. He tells her that certainty in these matters is never absolute so early, but that all the signs point one way, and that he would stake his chain upon it. She does not weep. That is not her way. But something moves across her face that is stranger than weeping, a kind of vertigo, the sensation of a person who has spent her life leaning against a door, only to find it was never locked. The curse, then, was not a curse, or the curse has broken, or the curse was only ever the poison of a dying woman's grief, given power by the belief of the one it was spoken to. It does not matter which. What matters is the calculation that now reorders itself in her mind, swift and vast, the way a great army reorders itself when the terrain shifts beneath it. Because this is not merely a private joy. Daenerys understands, better than almost anyone alive, that a Targaryen child is never merely a child born of her body and Jon's carries the blood of the last two dragons. It unites the two surviving branches of a house that the realm believed extinguished in the ashes of the trident. It answers the single question that no throne, however strong, can survive without answering: who comes after? Every dynasty that has ever fractured has fractured on that question. The succession is the fault line beneath all thrones, and a ruler without an heir is a ruler whose peace expires with her breath. She had known this. She had made her peace with ruling as the last of her name, telling herself that she would break the wheel and let others build what came after. But a wheel broken and left broken is only wreckage. A wheel broken and remade requires hands to turn it after hers are still. When Jon learns of it, he does not respond as a king. He responds first as a man, and the man is afraid. Consider his fear, because it is not a small or foolish fear. He knows what childbirth costs. He knows the graveyards are full of queens and common women alike who did not survive the bringing of life into the world. He knows the thing they have built is still young and still fragile, and that a child is a hostage to fortune in a way that armies and dragons are not. His hands tighten. He says her name, and there is a question in it, and beneath the question is dread. But there is joy also, warring with the dread, and the joy is the older and stronger emotion in him, because Jon Snow spent his whole life being told he belonged to no one and no line, and now he is to father a child who belongs to two. They speak of it privately for days before they speak of it to anyone else. This is the correct move, the patient move. A revelation of this magnitude cannot be spilled carelessly into the world. It must be timed. It must be shaped. They weigh the moment as one weighs a piece before advancing it across the board. Too soon, and the child becomes a target, a prize for every faction that might prefer the succession to remain uncertain. Too late, and the joy loses its power to bind. So they wait until the maester's certainty hardens, until the danger of early loss has thinned, and then they let the news go outward, carefully, like a tide released rather than a dam broken. And the realm changes color. This is the thing the ledgers cannot fully capture, the shift in the mood of a war-weary people who have buried too many suns and watched too many winters. War-weary lords who calculated their loyalties in terms of leverage now find themselves calculating in terms of continuity. A child means the peace might last. A child means the sacrifices might have purchased something more durable than a single lifetime of order. Even the North softens, and the North softens for no one easily. But this child will carry Stark blood through Jon, and the North that had swallowed a Targaryen queen only reluctantly now finds it can imagine a future in which the old blood of Winterfell sits upon the Iron Throne itself. The small folk light candles, the Septons offer prayers, and even those who do not pray to the Seven find themselves hoping. But hope, Daenerys knows, is also a weapon, and a weapon others may wish to turn. For not every lord who smiles at the news smiles for the same reason, and somewhere, in a solar far to the south, a letter is being written that does not congratulate. What if the two women who had every reason to hate one another discovered, quietly, in the long gray afternoons of a northern winter, that they were more alike than either had been willing to admit? Consider the arithmetic of it. Sansa Stark and Daenerys Targaryen, born a world apart, raised on opposite sides of a narrow sea, and yet forged in the same furnace. Both had been sold. Both had been beaten. Both had watched men decide their worth in coin and cattle, and both had survived those men and outlived them. This is the thing that begins to bind them, and it begins not in affection but in necessity. which is the only foundation upon which lasting alliances are ever truly built. The queen is with child, and the child changes the calculation. A pregnant sovereign cannot ride the length of the north to soothe fractious bannermen. She cannot stand in the courtyard at Winterfell and command the respect of men who watched Sansa Stark reclaim her home from a monster. So she does the thing that pride once forbade her. She asks. Not for help, precisely, for Daenerys Targaryen does not yet know how to ask for help. She asks for counsel, and Sansa, who has learned to read the shape of a request beneath the words that carry it, understands exactly what is being offered and exactly what is being withheld. They meet in the solar, always the solar, that room of maps and ledgers and small burning fires. At first the conversations are brittle, each woman measuring the other, each sentence a probe testing for weakness. Sansa speaks of the northern lords and their grievances, their long memories, their hatred of southern taxes and southern gods. Daenerys listens. This is new for her, the listening, and it does not come easily to a woman accustomed to the roar of dragons drowning out dissent. But she listens, because she must, and in the listening, she begins to see that Sansa Stark is not the sullen girl she first imagined, but a strategist who survived Littlefinger, survived Ramsay, survived the Lannisters, and came out sharper for all of it. The thaw is gradual. It happens in the spaces between the politics. It happens when Sansa mentions, offhand, a thing that Joffrey once did, and Daenerys recognizes in the telling the same flat, careful voice she herself uses when she speaks of the Dothraki tent, of Viserys, of the golden crown poured over a screaming skull. Neither woman weeps. Neither woman softens visibly. But something passes between them, an acknowledgement, a recognition of a wound shared across every difference of blood and banner. They do not become friends. They become something harder and more useful than friends. They become allies who understand precisely what the other has paid. Elsewhere in the castle, in the cold Godswood, where the leaves have long since fallen, Bran waits. He does not want the throne. He has told them this, and they have believed him, because a man who can see the death of every leaf before it falls has little appetite for the vanity of a crown. What he wants is to watch and to warn, and this is precisely what the realm needs of him now, for his sight has found something in the south, a gathering, a murmur among lords who smiled at the news of the child, and then rode home to write letters they did not sign. He tells Jon first. He tells him plainly, without ceremony, the way Bran tells everything now. There is a rebellion forming, he says. Not yet a rebellion, but the seed of one, a coalition of southern houses who fear a northern king, with dragons, more than they ever feared the peace he brings. They meet in secret. They speak of old grievances and older gods. They have not yet drawn steel, but steel is being counted in armories, and grain is being quietly stockpiled behind walls that face no enemy. Bran names the houses. He names the man at the center, a lord whose ambition had been mistaken for loyalty, and whose loyalty had always been a coin he intended to spend. The crown moves before the rebellion can. This is the value of the sight, not as a weapon of war, but as a weapon of prevention. Daenerys, who once would have flown south on Dragonback and reduced the conspirators to ash, chooses instead the slower blade. She sends riders. She sends letters. She invites the Lord to court under the guise of honor, and she surrounds him with such courtesy and such precise knowledge of his own secret dealings that he understands, before a single sword is drawn, that his plot has been unmade. The rebellion dissolves not in blood, but in the quiet horror of men who realize they have been seen. No battle is fought. No banners burn. The greatest victory, it turns out, is the war that never begins. And Jon watches all of this with the eyes of a man who has finally stopped fighting himself. For years, he was two things at war within one body: Stark and Targaryen. The boy who grew up in Winterfell and the heir to a bloodline of conquerors and dragons. He tore himself between them. He wondered which he owed his loyalty to, which name defined him, which grave he would be buried beneath. But the child growing in Daenerys has done something no council could accomplish. It has shown him that he need not choose. The child is both. The child is the union made flesh. And in that union, Jon sees at last that he was never two men at war, but one man who contained two histories, two houses, two ancient claims, joined not in conflict, but in continuance. He tells Daenerys this one evening, in the solar, when Sansa has gone and the fire has burned low. He speaks of it simply, because he has never known how to speak of anything except simply. And she takes his hand, and for a moment, the Queen and the King are only two people who have survived long enough to build something. But even as he speaks, even as the fire dims and the peace holds, and the rebellion lies buried before it could rise, a raven is landing on the battlements far above, its wings heavy with cold, and tied to its leg is a message that no one in the solar has yet read. The message, when it is read, carries no threat. This is the first thing worth understanding about the years that followed the long night. The raven brings word from Essos, from the free cities that had once trembled at the name of the Dragon Queen. And the word is not of war, but of trade, of grain ships and merchant fleets, and the slow, patient business of a world learning to trust itself again. Jon reads it in the morning light, and he does not reach for a sword, and he does not summon a council, and he does not lie awake calculating how many men he can raise. That, more than any coronation, is the measure of what the wedding had wrought. Peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is the moment a raven lands on a battlement, and no one's hand tightens on the hilt of anything. The child comes in the spring, a healthy birth, which in a land so long accustomed to grief, feels like something close to a miracle. Daenerys, who had been told by a witch in a distant tent that she would never bear a living child, holds her son against her breast and understands that prophecies, like kingdoms, can be unmade by those with the will to unmake them. The maesters record the birth in their great ledgers. A prince of two houses, Targaryen and Stark, dragon and wolf, fire and ice, bound not in the ancient antagonism of the songs, but in a single small heartbeat. The realm celebrates. Bells ring in King's Landing, and in White Harbor, and along the whole long road between, and for the first time in living memory, the ringing of bells means something other than alarm. Consider what did not happen, for it is often in the absences that history is truly written. There was no second dance of the dragons. The great fear that had haunted every Targaryen dynasty, the fear of two dragon riders with rival claims tearing the realm apart between them, dissolved the moment those two claims became one household, one marriage, one child who inherited both, and therefore owed war to neither. The cousins who might have raised banners against each other were instead the mother and father of the heir. The bloodline that had spent 3 centuries turning inward upon itself, brother against sister, uncle against nephew, kinslaying woven into the very fabric of the house words, found in this single generation a way to stop bleeding. It required no grand strategy. It required only a wedding held before the dead came south, when the world seemed to be ending and two people chose, in the face of that ending, to bind their fates together. The dragons thrive. This too is worth dwelling upon. Where once the small folk had watched the skies with dread, now they watch with something nearer to wonder. For the dragons over the rebuilt city are not instruments of conquest, but symbols of a peace so complete that even the most fearsome creatures in the world have nothing left to burn. They circle the Red Keep in the long golden evenings, and the child looks up at them from his mother's arms, and he is not afraid, because he has never known a world in which they meant fire and death. He knows them only as they are now, great and gentle giants who nest in the ruins of the dragon pit and answer to the blood in his veins. The settlement of the realm holds, and it holds because it was built not to satisfy the ambitions of the powerful, but to answer the genuine grievances of the many. The North is autonomous under Sansa, queen in the North, wolf-crowned in the halls of her ancestors, free at last from the Southern rule that had cost her family so dearly. She does not war with the crown, and the crown does not war with her, because the crown is her brother in all the ways that matter, and the treaty between them was written in the language of a family that has decided, finally, to stop losing its members to ambition. The South remains loyal to the joint monarchs, its lords bound by a peace that grows more comfortable with each passing season, until the men who had once schemed for the throne find that they have forgotten how, that the habit of loyalty has replaced the habit of treason. The wall stands still, but it stands as a monument now rather than a fortress. The Night's Watch is disbanded, its black cloaks folded away into the histories, for there is no longer anything to watch for. The dead are gone, truly gone, not merely driven back but ended. The great cold that had gathered beyond the world broken at Winterfell in a single terrible night. The men who once took the black to guard against an eternal enemy are free to go home, to take wives, to raise children, to live the lives that oath had denied them. And the wall, that vast monument of ice, remains only to remind those who come after of what was once feared and what was once overcome. In the throne room, beneath the Iron Throne, the child plays. The swords that make up that terrible seat were forged from the weapons of the defeated, hammered into a monument to conquest, 1,000 blades of 1,000 men who had knelt or died before the dragon's fire. Aegon the Conqueror had built it to remind the realm that a king should never sit easy, that rule was won and held by steel. And now a child plays beneath it, laughing, reaching up toward the twisted iron with small, untroubled hands, and the swords that had symbolized endless war watch over nothing more dangerous than a boy at play. Jon and Daenerys rule together, king and queen, and they do not sit easy on the throne, but they sit together, and that changes everything. The cycle of fire and blood that had consumed Westeros for generations, the wheel Daenerys had once dreamed of breaking, is broken not by grand destruction, but by a single quiet choice made in the shadow of the world's ending, a wedding before the long night. 2 hearts, then 2 houses, then a realm, and so the dawn came and held, and the years passed gently over a land that had at last learned to rest, and the dragons circled slow above a city rebuilt in peace, and beneath the swords of the conquered, a child slept and dreamed and knew nothing of war at all. And this brings us to the end of this alternate history. If you enjoyed exploring how events might have unfolded differently, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. We dive into new stories from the world of Westeros every single day, imagining the choices, battles, alliances, and destinies that could have completely changed the fate of the 7 kingdoms. And if you'd like to explore even more stories, Our Lorekeeper members unlock a brand new exclusive alternate history every single week. I'd also love to hear your thoughts. What do you think would have happened next? Did this version of history end better than the original, or would you have taken the story in a completely different direction? Leave your ideas in the comments, because many of the best future stories come directly from your suggestions. Thank you so much for watching and for spending your time with me. I'll see you tomorrow with another alternate history from Westeros. Until then,